Hello. So in today's video, we're going to talk about AI pricing and how much it costs to integrate an LLM, a large language model, into one of your workflows. We're going to focus on LLMs because that is the most common thing that you're usually going to be integrating with. But there are, of course, other kinds of models. There are image models, video models, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to be looking at large language models. So I've created a very simple spreadsheet to help us with our calculation. And the key concept to understand as part of this are tokens. So input tokens and output tokens. So AI pricing is measured by token because token is a unit in which AI operates. It takes in tokens and it outputs tokens. And a token is about 0.75 words on average. It can be less or it can be more, but on average, it's about 0.75 words. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out how many words or tokens we're going to be putting in, how many we're going to be getting out, and how often we're going to be doing that. For the purposes of this, the example we can look at is the one that we covered in the last video, which is enriching customer feedback text data. If we go back, here was the prompt that we were using. It's a sample prompt. And this prompt has about 300 words. So I filled in 300 words here. And then the output from that prompt, what OpenAI is going to return to us, was only about 20 words. It tells us what the rating was, what the tags were, but it's not a lot of words. And then let's just make the assumption that they have to run this about 15,000 times a month, because that's how many pieces of feedback they get a month. And then down here, it does all the calculations based on the input and the output, and it does it across two different providers, OpenAI and Anthropic. Here's the cost for the two providers. As you can see, it is pretty minimal, especially for a model like this, which is the GPT-4o mini model. And this model is perfectly good for this use case. It's going to work just fine. And so the cost is essentially negligible. Now, there are going to be times when the cost will be larger. For example, if instead of this simple use case that we're illustrating, maybe you were doing something where you needed to send contents of a whole big article or a book, clearly the number of input words would be significantly larger. It might be 100x what it is now. And so that would shoot your cost up. And one really interesting example are chatbots. So if you're building a chatbot, one thing to keep in mind is that with every new message, because these LLMs, they don't have a memory, with every new message, you also have to send in the history of all the previous messages. So with message number 100, you have to send in the previous 99 messages plus message 100. And so the input words per prompt really add up because it sort of compounds. There are some ways around that, probably too complex for this video, but we can cover them in the future. And the other thing, of course, is the monthly API calls assumption. So in this case, we're assuming 15,000 calls. But in a different example, like if you're running a social site or a social network, you might be doing this a lot more than 15,000 times. You might be doing millions of these calls per month. So that's for LLMs, and that's specifically for using a hosted solution. So OpenAI, Anthropic, they're hosted solutions. There is another option, which is using an open source model. So one example is Llama by Meta, Facebook. And that's an open source model, which means you can host it yourself. You don't have to rely on somebody else to host it. If you go with that solution, you're not going to be paying for per token like this. You're going to be paying to host the model. So you're going to be paying for the server that hosts the model. In some cases, that might be cheaper. In other cases, it might actually be more expensive because you're responsible for maintaining and updating a server. And most of the time, you should just use the hosted models. It's a lot easier to just rely on somebody else to do the hard parts of doing the hosting. And as you can see, it is cheap enough to where it usually doesn't make sense to do the hosting yourself. So that's all I have on AI costs. And until next time.